Pranam Arpit Bhai, Pranam Pavitra Bhai, Pranam Navan Bhai. I believe let's not wait any further. And
Pranam. Yeah, sure, sure. We can start.
uh, Namo Orientanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Sarvasamanam, Eso Panchanamakara Sarva Pavapranasanam, Mangalanam Chasavesam Pranamam Mangalam. Samyak Darshana Shuddham, Yogyanam Viratimeva Chapnoti, Dukkhanimittam Apidam, Tena Sulabdham Bhavati Janma. Anantapkari Tirthankar Bhagwans have established this Dharma Tirth for the upliftment of all jeeves in the world. However, as we saw the last time, it is only Bhavya jeeves who are capable of such emancipation, of such upliftment. Because a person's own yogyata, which is a person's own upadan, is of utmost significance. And when a person having yogya upadan meets yogya nimit, the time is right, the destiny is favorable to such a scenario, only then can a particular event, and in this case, the event of a person's upliftment in this universe happen. So, in view of the same, uh, Sri Pancha Sutra, in its first sutra, Pap Pratighat and Gun Bijadhan Sutra, were the last couple of Sundays we saw how numerous times in the past we have even taken Diksha and observed it in perhaps a Niratichar manner. And by virtue of that, we might have even ascended the highest comforts of Devlok. Despite this being the case, we are still back to square one without any considerable progress having been made. So, to solve this continuous cycle of going up to a very high place and then crashing down, the Acharya Bhagavan who composed this Granth gave a very simple solution that look, everything that you have been doing so far is in violation of a sequence. Once you do things in a particular sequence, will ensure, or dharma rather, will take care that you don't go back, you don't look behind to where you came from. From now on, it's only forward from this point. But this is only possible if we are to understand what the sequence is and implement the sequence in our life. Which is why Sri Pancha Sutra has also been divided into five parts, into five sutras. The first of which we saw, and the first of which deals with reducing or destroying a good component of pop in our lives, and then sowing the seed of dharma, sowing the seed of gun in our atma. We saw how this sowing of seeds and this destruction of pop can be done by implementing three solutions, which happen by reciting the sutra with the right bhav, that is Dushkrut Garha Sukrut Anumodna, and seeking refuge in the four elements, that is Arihant Sad Sadhu Bhagavans and Kevali Pragnab Dharma. Now, by doing this, a person attains what is known as Dharma Gun. This Dharma Gun can also be understood to be the starting point for Samyak Darshan, because as we know, Samyak Darshan is the foundation of it all. What is of essence here is that the dharma that is preached by Tirthankar Bhagwans is not only meant only for Bhavya Jeeves, it is only meant for those Bhavya Jeeves who have not more than one Pudgal per hour of their sansar remaining. So, in view of this, those Bhavya Jeeves who have, by way of serving the first sutra, sown the beej or the seed of dharma in themselves, these Jeeves are eligible to further their spiritual journey. So, this is the relation or the anusandhan between the first sutra and the second sutra. Having attained this dharma bij by a specific kshayopsham of mohaniya karma, the person naturally develops faith and inclination towards dharma, the dharma gun. And this person should think at this point that the virtues I have attained so far, they may all be temporary in nature, or they might be virtues of Audaik Bhav. But the virtues that I want are virtues of Shayuksham Bhav and eventually of Shaik Bhav. All of this emanates from the Dharma Gun. So he thinks of the nature or the Sarup of Dharma Gun, and he wonders, how are these virtues different from other virtues? How are these Dharma Guns different from other ordinary guns? And uh, while engaging in this contemplation, the words of the second sutra, the very introductory words, they uh, they act as a as a guiding principle along which you should direct your thoughts, because all of this ultimately is a mind game. Dharma, up until we become Vitarag, is all a mind game, because it is only Vitrag Paramatma who are known as a Manaska Yogi. Vitrag Paramatma is free of Man, of Mano Yoga. Until we reach that stage, it is imperative that we use our mind, we channel our mind, our thoughts, we streamline our thoughts in accordance with the principles or the guidelines shown by the Sarvagya Bhagavans. Today, there are a lot of people who talk about just shutting the mind completely and not thinking at all. Now, while such a thing is certainly not possible, because the mind is definitely going to engage in thoughts in some way or the other, even to lead people to such a position is very erroneous and misconceived, especially when done in the name of the dharma. Because the Jain dharma is very clear that any sadhana that you have to do requires immense mental power. And we all know, even when you study grants as basic as Jeev, Vichar, or Nav Tattva, we know that Upyog is the lakshan or the characteristic, the identifying characteristic of Chetana, of consciousness, of living beings. Any living being, no matter how uh, underdeveloped, how gross or how subtle it might be in appearance, or how immature or nascent it might be, there is always some degree of upyog present in this jeev. So to say that you stop thinking altogether, you make your mind free of all thoughts, is unfounded, because this is never practically possible. And it's as if one is, instead of helping a jeev realize its true swabhav, it's going on a backward trajectory wherein you're saying, become like Jad, become like Achetan, some Achetan Padarth. Because that is what only a Padarth that is not Chetanatmak will not have any upyog. Thus, a person thinks, and he thinks about the Dharma Gun, and he thinks about how these are different. So, here in the Sutra, in the very first Sutra, the Granthkar Bhagavan says this: Jayaye Dhamma Guna Padivatti Siddhaye Bhavijja Eesim Saruvam Payai Sundaratam Anugamittam Parovayaritam Paramatthaheyuttam Taha Duranucharattam Bhange Darunattam Mahamohan Janagatam Bhuo Dullahanti Evam Jaha Satye Uchiya Vihanenam Ajanta Bhavasaram Padivijjajja. The Sutrakar Bhagavan says that these dharma guns, they are such that they cleanse the conflicting parinam of the Atma, by virtue of which their very nature is Shuddh. Any other virtue that you take, if it is in accordance with the virtue of Dharma, it also becomes Shuddh. But any virtue devoid of Tattvik Dharma, and thus not being a Tattvik virtue, will not help any Atma cleanse their Parinam, their Parinati. So, what we understand by this is, and Kivli Bhagwans have truly said, Vattu Sahavo Dhammo. The swabhav of a particular vastu is its dharma. Accordingly, dharma is nothing but the swabhav of the atma, which is why the degree to which we become free of all podgalic upadhi, we also become free or shuddh to that extent. Which is why the Granthkar Bhavan, the first identifying characteristic of the virtue of dharma that the Granthkar Bhavan gives, is that these dharma guns, they clean the sanklisht parinam of the atma, because of which they are inherently beautiful, they are inherently good, they are inherently beneficial. Because these virtues are no different, they are not an outside material, they are materials stemming from within. Or, in other words, these virtues of dharma are a manifestation of the Atma's own virtues. There is no difference between the two. So, the first identifying mark of the virtue of dharma or the virtues associated with dharma is Payai Sundaratam, Prakriti Sundar. They are naturally beautiful. They are not, they are prakritik, that is natural, as opposed to krutrim or artificial, because they are not externally, enjoined upon the Atma. They come from within. The second identifying characteristic is Anugamitam, Anugamic. So, everything that we know as of now today, everything mundane, everything Pudgalatmak, is all going to go away when we switch uh, births, when we die and we take a new birth. But the virtue of dharma is such that is transferable, that follows you as you traverse from one birth to the other until it makes it makes sure that you reach a place where there is no need to do any pursue dharma as a part of sadhana anymore till you become krutkritya. The third adjective or identifying characteristic uses parovayaritam, paropkarita. These virtues are by themselves beneficial, they are paropkari, because by serving them, not only does one's own atma become, not only are you doing a favor to yourself, but you're also doing a favor to everyone else. And this is true because when a person practices dharma, and dharma is in the form of ahimsa, sayam, and tap, when a person practices dharma, they are essentially doing paropkar on other jeeves as well. Because when a person, let's say, takes sarvavirti, they are giving abhedan to the jeeves of the entire 14 Rajlok. When a person takes deshvirti, they are still taking the sankalp of not killing nirapradhi tras jeev. So to that degree, they are also giving abhedan to those specific tras jeeves. And thus, dharma is paropkari. And the fourth adjective that the Sutragar Bhagavad uses is Paramatha Hyottam. This dharma or the dharma gun, they are in their truest essence the cause of Paramarth, of the supreme essence that is of moksha. Having said this, now they talk about these four adjectives talk about how dharma guns are original, originally beautiful, originally helpful. They come along with the jeev in one birth and the next till the jeev requires it. And lastly, how they are Paramarth Hetu Bhut. Having said thus, now the Sutragar Bhagavan says that once you attain this dharma gun, following it or observing it or protecting it is very difficult. And this can be better understood with respect to, classifying tattvic dharma in various ways. For instance, you can classify dharmas on the basis of their entry and exit. There are certain dharmas in which both the entry and exit are easy. There are certain dharmas in which the entry and exit are both difficult. There are certain dharmas in which the entry is difficult but the exit is easy. And there are certain dharmas in which the entry is easy but the exit is difficult. So you can look at this in various ways. You can classify any dharma or any purported school of thought claiming to be dharma in these four ways. The the first category, or if you classify it properly, the fourth category, wherein the entry and exit are both difficult, is the Jain Shasan. Because the Tattvagyan in the Jain Shasan is so profound that to get inside the Shasan is very difficult. To actually attain the Shasan with the right bhav is extremely difficult. But once a person attains the Shasan in the truest manner, unless there is some wild attack by Mohaniya Karma, some upsurge of monia karma that the Atma is at that moment unable to suppress or fight. Exiting this shasan is not something that happens easily. A person would actually have to put in effort to leave the shasan, because a person who can think would would think it in a manner uh, so profound that he would never be willing to leave the shasan. Now, other religions, they will fit in the residual three categories. So, for our present purposes, what we're looking at is attaining dharma in the first place, or attaining the right dharma, the dharma of the fourth category, observing it and abiding this dharma or preserving these dharma guns is extremely difficult. This is what the Granthkar Bhagavan says. And having said thus, the the immediately next sentence that uh, the Granthkar Bhagavan writes is Bhange Darunatam. Once you take upon yourself this dharma, once you start practicing, or once you uh, take the requisite niyams associated with this dharma, and then you do the bhang, you violate these virtues of dharma, these codes of conduct associated with dharma, the result of it is very darun. It is very terrifying. It is very scary. This is because once a person violates or the dharma that they have accepted, this leads to an immense bandh of mahamonia karma. That is, that could be in the form of mithyatva and avirti both. And because of this, there is a generation of an anubandh of pap, a chain of pap, because of which attainment of dharma again is very, very difficult. So, in the very initial sutra, the Sutrakar Bhagavan first uh, attracts us towards the nature of the dharma qualities. But as soon as we come halfway, the Granthkar Bhagavan says, look, now that you've taken dharma, and if you are unable to abide by it, if you're going to compromise on your virtues or your niyams, this is the consequence that's going to ensue. Now, this is not to scare us, and we call our attention to a gentleman who earlier, I think about a month or two ago, wrote that Mahatmas are scaring people by talking about the consequences of not following dharma, by talking about hell, etc. Now, if you look at it, the same style of preaching is used in the sutra as well. And this is not even to preach to others, but the Granthkar Bhagavan says that a person who attains dharma thinks in this manner. A person thinks about, on one hand, how dharma is extremely beautiful, and on the other hand, he also thinks that once I let go of this dharma, attaining it again will be very difficult. So this is not a person who truly wants to practice dharma does not experience any fear, even in this regard, because he knows that he will try his best to abide by this dharma in a niratichar manner. But say even if he isn't, the fear of durgati is what keeps him away, or keeps his paranams uh, safeguarded, even while he might have to do something wrong. And this is the vivek that Samyak Darshan naturally gives a person. So uh, the sixth point that the Sutrakar Bhagavan writes here is how uh, how disastrous the consequences can be when a person compromises on their dharma or the niyams that they've taken, when they relinquish or violate or breach the niyams that they've taken. Which is why in grunts like Updesh Mala, uh, it is written, especially with a view, in view of Sadhu Bhagavans, it says that it is better to it is better to be burnt alive than to violate the niyams that a person has taken. And this is why Samyadrashti Atmas like Nandish and Muni, when they realized that their Charitra Munya karma is coming to a full spring, when they are unable to abide by their charitra properly, the first alternative that they are thinking of is ending their life rather than ending the niyams that they have taken. Now, don't get me wrong and take this as a promotion of suicide, because this is not that. There's a huge difference. The circumstances and conditions are also very different. But what is of essence here is how important it is to safeguard our dharma even if it involves sacrificing our lives in certain, extreme situations. Now, apologies. Uh, the Mahatma here, having said these 8 points, four about the attractiveness of dharma and four about the disastrous consequences of dharma. uh, the Sutrakar Bhagwant wants the reader or the learner or the student to think about these, about the benefits and the detriments reaping from the observation and the violation of dharma, balance them, scale them, and then you juxtapose this with your own ability, with your own capability and competence. So you are able to find out what is your power, or what is your limit, or what is your extent to which you can practice dharma. And the Tikakar Bhagwan writes that in accordance with the Shastrokht Vidhi, and with a very strong mental resolution, this person ought to accept the virtues of dharma gun. Right after saying this, he also says that without thinking, in a hasty manner, one must not accept these dharma guns, because without thinking, a hasty, any hasty activity could often lead to disastrous consequences. Now, this is what the Sutrakar Bhagwan writes, and this is, of course, true. So, on the other hand, we see several references in the scriptures wherein Shravaks, or not even people who are Shravaks, but people who are extremely indulgent bhogis, these people also come into contact with a good nimit, and they immediately decide to take sarvavirti, not even deshvirti, and they pounce at it. They pounce at it and they stick with it, and they attain moksha perhaps in that very birth. I'm sure everyone knows of examples like these. Be the example of Ramayan, for instance, has several examples like these. Ramayan, as Acharya Bhagavan would often say, is a gold mine of diksha. Every chapter you turn to, there are hundreds and thousands of dikshas happening in Ramayan. So, while this is completely true, we look at the example of Dhanna Ankar, Dhanya Kumar, Shalipadra's brother-in-law. When he was of Shalibhadra taking diksha, and he mocks Shalibhadra, and Shalibhadra's sister, that is Dhanya Kumar's wife, tells him that, oh, if you can be so ridiculous, if you can ridicule him in this manner, if you can ridicule my brother in this manner, why don't you show your prowess in this regard? And he immediately he says, okay. uh, while this was said in a joking, taunting spirit, he takes it upon him seriously, and immediately he takes diksha with Shalibhadraji. And the day he takes diksha, or both of them rather, the day they take diksha, and the way they follow it, they observe that charita till the end, and they go to Devlok from Vaibhargiri, on Rajagruhi. If any of you happen to go there, there's a specific section of Vaibhargiri and a temple there dedicated to Shalibhadraji and Dhanna Ankar. This That site alone radiates so much uh, positivity, s- you know, uh, so many days of brahmacharya, of tap, that even for aspirants, it is a good place to go and just absorb or soak in the vibes of that place. But the point is, Dhanna Ankar, he took a decision which, as such, if you see, is very hasty, and yet he observed it till the end, and now he's in Sarvat Sadzaman, and both Shalabhadra and Dhannaji are going to go to moksha in their very next birth. So we see several examples like these. Uh, the question is, w- what defines hastiness? Or in such a context, would such an act be called hasty? Now, this is one example. Think of a very contradicting example from Ramayan, let's say. I'm sure everyone knows of Bhamandal, Sitaji's brother. Now, after the entire war is over and everything's all calmed down, Bhamandal, who is a Vidyadhar, uh, this king, he's on the top of his mansion, of his palace, on the terrace, and he's thinking to himself, look, all of this is over. uh, so many people died in the war, so many people took diksha. My own sister took diksha, my brother-in-law took diksha, Ramchandraji, and he also went to moksha. And truly the sansar is asar. And as he thinks about all of these things, um, his vairagya, furthers and furthers, and he thinks to himself, oh, if I get the yog of a Guru Bhagwant, or perhaps I should scout for a Guru Bhagwant, and maybe when he comes, I'll take Diksha. So he's relying on a future event to happen, and uh, he's engaged in Vairagya, but he still he still obviously hasn't taken Diksha. He's in a state of avirti. While he's thinking thus to himself, it's not even been a few moments that he's thought about it, and out of nowhere, there's a bolt of lighting from the sky that hits him right in the head, and as a paranam of which he dies on the spot. So examples like these remind us, no matter how noble your thoughts might be, the uh, the consequences of not taking charitra or not acting immediately can be very dangerous. So we see examples of both these sorts, right? So keeping these in mind, we look at this last line of the first part of the sutra, which says, "Do not act hastily." So what is a person supposed to do if not act hastily? Here, the haste refers to a vivek, not seeing or not gauging one's atma's capacity and then taking diksha. These Mahapurush that we hear about, they were not people who, on seeing or attaining Vairagya or some nimit of Vairagya, had a surge of Vairagya and later that Vairagya died down. This is not generally the case with most of these Mahapurush. So, such an act, even though it might seem speedy, it might seem hasty, is not in reality a hasty decision. It is a very well thought out decision because they know that they've always known rather that we have the samarthya, the ability to do it. It's just that we have been engulfed in Pramad for the longest time. So, the same applies in this regard as well because uh, for Yogya Jeev, having the Yogya capacity and having the right uh, ability to think and practice, nothing is impossible. And even if they act quickly in this manner, there is no haste that they have truly committed, or unreasonable haste rather. We look at the example of Tirthankar Bhagwans uh, versus ordinary sadhu Bhagwans when the time is right. Uh, the moment a Tirthankar Bhagwan takes Diksha, we know how generally their diksha happens. There's a huge procession, and they do Panch Mushti they bow down to Siddh Bhagwans. They take the pratigya of diksha, Karimi Samayam Savajam Jogam Pachakhami, etc. And the moment they take this pratigya, and think about it, the moment they take this pratigya, they attain the fourth type of gyan, that is Mana Paryav Gyan. Now, compared to ordinary Mahatmas, well, this might happen with other Mahatmas too. What we generally see is that Manahaparyav Gyan is attained at a later stage when a Mahatma rises through the conducts or the different grades of Charitra and makes them, then they make themselves more and more refined. But with Tirthankar Bhagwans, it is a universal law that they attain Manahaparyav Gyan immediately upon taking Sarvavarti Samayik. So again, this makes us think how quick can things happen. And this is something truly worth thinking because when Paramatma takes Charitra, and which is that Paramatma's Diksha is also known as Diksha Kalyanak, although there are many more reasons that could be attributed to that. Paramatma, when he takes Diksha, has so much of excitement. There is so much virya or spiritual, mental, and physical power that is going into that process that as soon as you know, uh, gets on the swing of Diksha, the swing oscillates completely towards the seventh Gunasthanak, which is the Apramat Gunasthanak, and only Mahatmas in the Apramat Gunasthanak can attain Manaparyavgyan. So as soon as they take Diksha, they attain this Gunasthanak, they attain Manaparyavgyan, and Paramatma continues to practice his charitra uh, for a good amount of time before attaining Kevalgyan and then Moksha. So, uh, our point for consideration here is, while one must surely think before acting, this doesn't mean that we spend an unreasonable amount of time only thinking and not acting. So, one must apply their rationale here and try to gauge how things work. Having said thus, if you see in the second sutra, one word that is recurring in the plural form is dharma gun. Now, what are these dharma gun? So, just Uttakar Bhagan himself lists them out, and these are virtues that everyone's heard of, surely. He says, Tam jaha, thulaga panay vayo viramanam, thulaga musa vayo viramanam, thulaga aditta dana viramanam, thulaga mehuna viramanam, thulaga pariggaha viramanam ichai. These virtues of dharma or dharma gun are as follows: Sthul Pranadipat Viraman, Sthul Mrushavad Viraman, Sthul Adattadan Viraman, Sthul Maithun Viraman, and Sthul Parigraha Viraman. Uh, the last part is I, so it says etc. Adi. By etc. you understand it to be the Shiksha Gun, etc. So here, the first question that arises is, why has the Sutrakar Bhagwant not listed the five Mahavrats? Why have they first listed the five Anuvrats of a Shravak? Because if you remember from a previous conversation, we have also spoken about how generally when dharma is being shown to uh, a mixed audience, particularly the higher dharma must be shown first, and then the lower dharma, and then the lower dharma, and so on. This is very well debated, discussed, and also referred to in the scriptures by scriptures like Yog Shatak of Haribhaja Shri Maharaj, etc., wherein they talk about how if a Mahatma or an Updeshak Mahatma, when they are preaching to a mixed audience, and that is an audience having people of different capabilities, if they are only to show lower dharma to a set audience, and that particular audience or some people in that audience have the capacity to practice the higher dharma, then the Updeshak will be at fault for all the pap that they could have stopped the audience from doing, but they did not do so by way of their, you know, reckless Updesh. Which is why to give Updesh is only a matter or only a power that rests in Gitarth Bahushrut Muni Bhagwans who are authorized by their Guru Bhagwans to do so. So keeping this in mind is very important. Uh, Even with respect to Shravaks are generally not uh, mandated to do Updesh. What they are supposed to do, and I reiterate this, I've said this before, what they are supposed to do is to relay the message of Guru Bhagwans uh, to their Kalyan Mitras, to their families, to their friends, etc., by saying, today Guru Bhagwan said so and so. So the marg remains fixed. Now, uh, in this sutra, and by talking of this sutra, I mean the Pancha Sutra as a whole, obviously, the ultimate purpose is to attain Sarvavarti Samayik, is to take Diksha. So, the five Mahavrats, how to take them or how to train one's Atma to take them will also all be discussed. Um, but for the present purposes, they're talking of the five Anuvrats, assuming that the audience would first practice Deshvarti and then attain Sarvavarti. In this regard, again, it's important to draw our attention to Yoga Shastra and several other grants which say that true Deshvarti only comes when there is a lalsa, when there is a strong desire to attain Sarvavarti. A person may not have the parinam to attain Sarvavarti, but the manorath of attaining sarvavrti should always be present. Having listed these five vrats and answering the question why the first five Mahavrats aren't shown, the Granthkar Bhagwan says, and this is now we're going a bit towards the Dravyanuyog side, uh, with respect to the sthiti of Mohaniya Karma, which we discussed to a good degree while we were discussing Samyak Darshan. So, uh, just listen to this carefully, perhaps, and if there are any questions, we can obviously discuss them. The Sutrakar Bhagwan says that firstly, to attain Samyak Darshan, you need to reduce the Utkrisht or the maximum sthiti of Mohaniya Karma. This is well known. So, after having attained Samyak Darshan, when there is one Koda Kodi Sagropam of Karma Sthiti left, and from that Sthiti of Mohaniya Karma, when roughly 2 to 9 Palyopam of Karma Sthiti is destroyed or reduced, a person attains Deshvarti. Now, from that, uh, from this reduced state of Mohaniya Karma, reduced by 2 to 9 Palyopam, from that, you further reduce certain countable Sagropams of Karma Sthiti. And so then when the remainder of the city is left, so at this point is where you attain Sarvavirti. From that, again you go down, you destroy several countable Sagropams of Karma Sthiti. That is when you attain Upsham Shreni. And from that, when you destroy several countable Sagropams of Karma Sthiti, you attain Shapak Shreni and then Kival Gyan and then of course Moksha. So what we're looking at is here from Samyak Darshan, from attaining Samyak Darshan to attaining Deshvati requires a reduction of Karma Siddhi of 2 to 9 Palyopam. But from attaining Deshvarti to attaining Sarvavirti requires the destruction of countable Sagropams. So there's a huge difference there, which is very often, and this is all interconnected obviously, uh, which is why we often say that even the highest uh, category of Shravak, even if it is a Samvas Anumati Shravak, a Shravak who is only Anumati in Pap is that he's living in the same house. Otherwise, he's completely detached from everything else. Even a Shravak of that highest grade is inferior by a million times to a sadhu who has taken Diksha today. So the difference is huge. Now, keeping in mind this difference, the Granthkar Bhagwan says that Jeeves, so the Shishya only asked the question that this sthiti of 2 to 9 Palyopams, does it get reduced gradually or can it also happen at once? In answer to which the Sutrakar Bhagwan, the Guru Bhagwan says that it can happen in both ways, but for most types of jeeves, this happens in a gradual manner, whereas in some jeeves it can also happen directly. Uh, and you see this in many jeeves as well. You see some jeeves who take Diksha directly uh, upon attaining Samyak Darshan. Now and this is seen even practically. You compare this figure, the figure of these jeeves, to the figure of jeeves who have attained Samyak Darshan and then practiced Shravak Dharma for a while, uh, refined their Atma by the code of conduct of a Shravak Dharma, escalated their Parinam step by step, and then gradually have taken Sadhu Dharma. So you'll obviously see that the latter part uh, in number definitely topples the former, which is why, keeping in mind this majority of audience, he says that most people are going to attain Deshvarti first, and then as a result of Deshvarti or by practicing Deshvarti, they retain Sarvavirti, which is why when they're talking of the Dharma Gun, they've referred to the different guns of a Shravak. All right, and then the Sutrakar Bhagavan quotes previous scriptures, and there's an interesting discussion of how a person goes to Devlok when the Bandha Samadarshan happens and so on. Uh, Having discussed that, the Mahatma proceeds to discuss In the third part of the sutra, how should a person who has attained or who has accepted these dharma gun, essentially a person who has now accepted deshvriti, how should he endeavor to protect them and preserve them? And there are several steps shown in the sutra. These are steps actually worth noting down uh, everywhere possible, because it's not an exhaustive list definitely, but it's a good number of things to keep in mind on a daily basis, and to even go back and refer to from time to time. The first thing, and uh, some of you, perhaps Arpit Bhai, would know from the last time we were discussing the 15 steps of attaining Adhyatma Prapti that we saw, I think, a year or two ago. Uh, these steps are very similar to that, in the sense that certain solutions that are given here have a have an uncanny resemblance to the solutions shown in those 15 steps. The first step is Sayana Gahage Siya, Sayana Bhavage Siya, Sayana Paratante Siya, Anahi Moha Visa Paramamanto, Jalam Rosai Jalanassa, Kamma Vahite Gicha Satham, Kappa Payava Siva Falassa. The first step that is shown is Sada, always study Jin Agya and always listen to Jin Agya. And by always studying and listening to Jin Agya, you accept or you understand what Jin Agya is. Here, and here it is very clearly written. We talk about Agya all the time, right? Here, what is Agya? In this Tika, Shriman Haribhajan Saraswati Maharaj has clearly defined what Agya is, and he says it in a very simple uh, sentence: Agya Agama Uchyate. Here, Agya is Agam, because Agam is Apta Vachan, and the Vachan, or the words of those who are Apt, or those who are perfect, is Janagya, and this Janagya is in the Agams. So, studying or learning to padas from the Agams is what is being talked about here. Having understood Janagya, the second step is Sayana Bhavagesya. Continuously do bhavan or do chintan of what Bhagwan's Agya is. In the scriptures, when you talk about the four types of dharma dhyan, the very first type of dharma dhyan is Agya Vichai, to think about the Agya of Paramatma. And this could be in different contexts. Sky is the limit. The more you run your mind, the more karmakshay will obviously happen. Which is why even here you see, to attain, ultimately all of this is about attaining karmakshay and attaining shashvat sukh. But nowhere do you see that there is any discussion of not thinking altogether, as we often hear in certain practices now that I was referring to earlier. It could be certain Buddhist practices wherein you refrain from thinking altogether. All of these have no place in the Jain Shasan at all. Jain Shasan, and as you see now, will only talk about streamlining your thoughts to run in a directed manner shown by the Tarak Tirthankar Bhagwans. So, understanding Janagya, doing Chintan or Bhavana of Janagya, and then Sayana Paratantesya. Now, these words of the Granthkar Bhagwant might uh, hurt, or might, provoke someone who hasn't attained the required Sharapsham of Mithyatamunya Karma. The uh, the Tikakar Bhagwant also writes, Sadagya Paratantraha Syadanushtanam Prati. Every Anushtan, no matter how tiny that Kriya is, every Anushtan that you do, always do it by being paratantra, or being bound by the agya of Paramatma. And if you look at the definition of agya, being bound by the scriptures. Here we pause to think, if every Anushtan that we do, it could be anything from Jin Puja or Samaik or Vyakhyan Shravan, or even doing Guru Vandan, is it in accordance with the agams? Is it free of the dosh that have been shown in respect of all of these kriyas? The Jin Puja, it could be the 84 ashatnas of the Janalaya, ensuring that uh, the Manvashankaya yogs are all cleansed, ensuring that there are the 7 types of shuddhis that are prescribed in Chaitanya Bhasha and other scriptures. With respect to Guru Bhagwan's, uh, are we avoiding the 33 ashatnas that are prescribed in the scriptures in that regard? With respect to Kausag, are we avoiding the different, I believe, 18 dosh that are shown in the scriptures, and so on? So, how paratantra or how restrained or how bound by jin agya are we is something that we have to think about at this juncture. Because, and the reason why is said right after, Ana hi moha visa paramamanto, jalam rusai jalanassa, kamma vahiti gicha satham, kappa payavo siva falassa. Some beautiful examples given to glorify and to talk about Sri Janagya. Uh, I Manoj, I'm referring to the book right now. I don't have the sutra with me. If I think Smith Bhai has pinned the sutra to the WhatsApp group. If you were to go to the WhatsApp group, let me just um, share the page number.
Yeah, I have the book. I was just it's easier when if you like scroll to the specific screen share the sutra
Right, right.
in the.
I'm referring to like a hardbound book at the moment.
Oh,
Uh,
all right. Do you mind if I share? I have access.
oh, please feel free to. Absolutely. It's on. Let me just find the page number. I believe it's page number 21. Arpit Bhai, has Manoj Bhai left the call or?
I think he might be joined from a different device. He's back now.
Yeah, sorry, permission issues. So I had to restart my browser. Let me go.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So the Granthkar Bhagwan here says that Jin Agya is like that mantra which removes the poison of moha from the Atma. It is that water which calms down the fire of Dvesh in the Atma. It is that scripture of medicine which cures the Atma of the disease of karma. And lastly, it is that Kalpa Vruksh which definitely gives the fruit of moksha. All of this, all of these examples, he gives to Janagya. So this is how he substantiates the previous sentence wherein he says Ana Sayana Paratante Siya. Always be Paratantra with respect to Agya while doing any Anushtan. A person might not be able to do many Anushtans, so even if he does a few in accordance with Agya, with the Agya of Paramatma, that Anushtan will definitely yield fruits. Now, a person studies, listens to, and understands Agya as the first step. He contemplates upon it, having contemplated it and perfected his understanding and imbibed it in his soul. Every Anushtan that he does, he implements Dinagya wherever appropriate. All right. So, having stated these three steps, the fourth step, which is the first step of attaining Adhyatma Prapti, as Haribhadra Shri Maharaja says, it is, uh, so we look at a couple more here. Vajjija Adhamma Mitta Jogam, Chintija Bhinava Paviye Gune, Anai Bhavasangaye Agune, Udagga Sahakaritam Adhamma Mittanam, Ubhaya Loga Garahiyattam Asuha Joga Paramparam Cha. The first is Varjayet Adharma Mitra Yogam. That is, every friend who is an Akalyan Mitra, you should renounce their company. An Akalyan Mitra is a person, or is that friend, is that influence that causes the spiritual degradation of the Atma, that leads the Atma away from spiritual welfare. It often so happens that, and this is the case of the most of us, we have only a handful of Kalyan Mitras, and we have a plethora of Kalyan Mitras, because to find Kalyan Mitras is in this day and age, it's definitely not rare, but uh, it is our laxity, our pramad, that we do not go out of our comfort zone to develop friendships with Kalyan Mitras. Whereas if it is a business relationship, a professional relationship, we'll move heaven and earth to find where these people are, people that whose influence, whose power, or whose association that you could use positively or exploit to benefit your worldly interests. Do we do the same in respect of dharma or not is a huge question mark. So before even making new friends, the direction given here is in a negative tone. Varjayet adharmamitra yogam. Those friends who are propelling you towards adharma, renounce their company. Because sometimes, and most times, it often so happens that we think that their influence on us is negligible, that we are able to, uh, you know, stay stabilized in dharma. But uh, we realize it pretty late, and often it's too late for us to even mend things. By the time we come to a realization that we have been robbed of the wealth of dharma because of such company. Having said that, the fifth point that the Granthkar Bhagwan writes is, uh, now you have taken the different guns of Deshvarti. So having taken those, Sthul Pranatipat Viraman, Sthul Mrushavad Viraman, etc., having taken those, you think of the benefits that you are reaping from each of these qualities. And this is not only beneficial uh, in the needed time, but if a person were to do this on a daily basis, it also helps them remember the different niyams that they have taken, and it also helps them, you know, uh, become more sthir with respect to the virtues or the niyams that they have taken. Because when you're thinking of the benefits, you're thinking of the benefits that are accruing by way of practicing these different vrats and niyams, you are naturally going to be doubly excited or triply excited, and you'll practice them with even more vigor, with more excitement. So the next step that the Sutrakar Bhagwan says is, Anadi bhava sangatanscha agunan sadaivaviratatvena. The uh, Now you're thinking on one hand of the virtues associated with your niyams, with dharma. On the other hand, you think of the detriments or the vices that are associated with this sansar in which you have been present from anadikal. So uh, it's it balances the both of them out, right? Because on the one hand, this is a negative direction, a negative argue of the scriptures. On the other hand, there's a positive commandment as well. Having said the two, Haribhadra Swishari Maharaja in his Tika writes, you should do this every day without even forgetting to do it for one day. There should be no gap in doing any of these things. Because, and this is not something that is impossible for any of us to follow, because of certain situations, it might so happen that say someday you're traveling and you are unable to find Guru Bhagwan's around you and you're unable to do guru vandan, for instance. But something like this is it is all a mind game. So you can think or you can bring these thoughts to your mind no matter where you are. Having said this, the seventh step and the last step that we're considering for today is to think of the consequences of being in the company of a Kalyan Mitras. We go back to the fourth step, and he says that a Kalyan Mitras, a Dharma Mitras, they they help us nourish our vices. And the Atma has always had an inclination from Anadikal to nourish, its own vices. So it's very difficult to stop that when you're getting company that is helping you do what you've always done. There is nothing novel here. By being in their company, you're also giving anumati or your consent to all the pap that they do. And this works in multiple ways. If we take the example of Shripal and Maina, in their previous births, Maina Sundari by herself was she had not done much that would cause her to suffer so much. But just because of her rag for Shripal, who was her husband even in the previous birth, and Shripal did Ashatna of Sadhu Bhagwans of Dharma. Because of this, because of her attachment towards Shripal, she also in a way gave her anumati to the pap committed by Shripal, because of which she also had to suffer in the next birth with Shripal. So it's a very dangerous cycle. Our attachments, we often think of them as, oh, when the time comes, we'll get rid of these attachments. But we don't see the longer consequences of these attachments. We might not engage in so-called bigger vices like drinking or eating abhaksha food or so on. But while we are in the company of those who do, uh, and especially while when they're doing these prohibited activities in front of us, that's a different thing altogether. There is obviously anumati in even being or standing in their presence then. But in a case where even if they're not doing it in a pratyaksh manner, in a direct manner, but simply because you have rag towards them, the pap that they are doing uh, on a daily basis, and in case of a Kalyan Mitras, it's always going to be large amounts of pap, and the larger amount of their life is going to be papmay. So we're indirectly giving our anumati in all of these scenarios as well. This happens one way this happens is by way of attachment. The other is just by being around them physically, which is why in grunts like Shraddha Vidhi, to ensure that we do not give our pap by way of anumati, the third type of uh, doing karma bandh, which is karan, karavan, and anumodan, which involves anumati as well. In the third classification, to avoid this pap of anumati, the one thing that the Shraddhavadikar, the Granthkar writes in Shraddhavadi is to stay away from people who are engaging in karmadan, like, say fishermen or poachers and hunters and so on. So there, they are not saying that you know, they're basically opening that the very presence or the very fact that you are staying in an area around them will eventually lead to scenarios when you would have to give your anumati in the pub that they do in one way or the other. So here, in context of Kalyan Mitras, one must think about how, by way of anumati, etc., uh, we we suffer not only in the next birth but also in the present, because and this can also be understood by way of parents telling us stay away from bad people, stay away from people who are taking you away from dharma. If it could so happen that their vision, if they haven't attained dharma, that is, our elders, they might see it from only a worldly perspective. But even to that worldly extent, Kalyan Mitras are always going to be detrimental to us. So in this birth and the next and in the future, uh, they are detrimental. They lead to a parampara of Ashubh Karma Bandh, and that leads to a parampara of Ashubh Yog, that is Ashubh Man, Vachan, and Kaya. So the end of all of the discussion, the fourth and the seventh point, is one to stay away from them and to think about what kind of consequences would ensue if we were to not do that. All right. So it's time for now, I believe. So we'll stop here. If there are any questions, let's please discuss them. No, Smilbhai. So Upshram Shreni is not inevitable at all. In fact, it might so happen that most jeeves wouldn't go on the Upshram Shreni at all. The discussion with respect to Upshram Shreni was only to show what kind of reduction or what kind of tartamta you need in the limit of or the city of Mithyatamonia Karma uh, to attain Upshram Shreni. It doesn't that part is not to be viewed in context of the fact that Upshram Shreni is inevitable. Thank you, Smith Bhai. Is there anything else? If not, we'll end here for the day.
Pranam Parshvai. Parshvai, this is not related to the Panch Sutra, but like we have 12 types of Siddh Bhagwan, right?
There are 15 types of Siddha Bhagavans mentioned in Sthanak Sutra and Navtattva Prakran.
But we only, when we say Namo Siddhanam, we only like pray to one of them, right?
No, Namo Siddhanam, in fact, is in the plural form. So we are not only bowing down to those who are Bhav Siddh, who have attained Siddhagati, but we're also bowing down to those who have become Siddh in the past and those who are going to be become Siddh in the future. But as we say, Jaya Ya Siddha, Jaya Bhavisanti Nagaya Kale, Sampaya Vattamana Sarvete Vihena Vandame.
Okay, okay. I was actually reading somewhere and it was written, we only bow down to Karm Kashya Siddha.
Only two?
Karm Kashya Siddha. He alone is referred by us in the second foot of Panch Parmeshwari mantra.
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what category of Siddha Bhagat you're referring to.
Uh, Karm Kashya Siddha.
I'm afraid I do not know what that means.
Oh, this
Could
is like from the book you share, like Philosophy of Soul,
could,
Atma
could you
Tattva Vichar.
could you perhaps share the relevant page in the group or here perhaps, and then we can look at it. So what you might find is when we're bowing onto any of the Panch Parmeshthi, you might see the use of the word in the singular form, but that doesn't mean that we're bowing onto a unitary entity. All of these Panch Parameshthi, and this is not only in case of the Siddhapad, whenever we say Shri Namaskar Mahamantra, all of the pads firstly are in the plural form. All of the pads refer to those Panch Parameshthi who are or who have or who will become Panch Parameshthi, that is Panch Parameshthi of the past, present, and the future. Thirdly, we bow down to all these Panch Parameshthi uh, in the form of Dravya Nikshep, that is, again, their past and their future. With respect to their Bhav Nikshep, that is their present form. With respect to their Sthapna Nikshep, it is the form of their idols, pictures, representations, graphical illustrations, whatsoever. And lastly, in context of their Nam Nikshep, that is my names, such as Rusha, Bajit, Sampa, Vavanandan, Sumti, etc. So this is a blanket uh, rule that applies everywhere. Whenever you and and in a tattvic manner, whenever you bow down to or whenever you do aradhana of particular uh, unitary element in the Panch Parameshthi, you are in a way doing bhakti of infinite uh, you know entities of that grade or of that class bill of the Panch Parameshthi. That is, when you serve one sadhu bhagwant, you're with the right bhav, you're also serving infinite sadhu bhagwants of the past, present, and the future.
Okay, I got it. One more question. When you shared the message in the group, the uh, the recent one about not watching the YouTube lecture or video lecture of such sadhus, and you wrote one can read the relevant literature in the absence of a monk in their city or sadhu bhagwans in their city. So there was one of the comment in the message, in the following message, that uh, like printing books also cause violence. So how can like we justify that?
So, firstly, the first question that one needs to discuss here is who is the one who's printing books? Is it the Sadhu Bhagwant who is engaging in the printing of books? If yes, then that is not part of their achar. What Sadhu Bhagwants should do is, or if they have literature available with them, they share it with the Shravaks, and if the Shravaks feel appropriate, they get it printed. This is the duty of the Shravaks. You'll never see uh, I mean, even if you read a dharmic book, for the most part, you'll see a Mahatma as an author, perhaps, but you'll never see him as the publisher or the printer, because that is the duty of Shravaks. Secondly, so with respect to Shravaks, the culp is totally different. A Shravak, if necessary, may even go abroad to talk about dharma if the Guru Bhagwan permits and if the situation so demand. We hear of P. Chandra Raghav Gandhi going to Chicago for the World Parliament of Religions in 1883. Uh,
Mm,
but because he was sent by the Sangh. So, in such situations, a Shravak may do that if necessary. But this is not the kalp or the achar maryada for sadhu bhagwans who have explicitly taken the five Mahavrats. And in fact, uh, these Mahavrats also have exceptions, surely. But in grants like the Mahanishit Sutra, uh, there are three specific codes of conduct that have no exceptions altogether. So in case of those, you can't even carve out exceptions, where the scriptures themselves say there are no exceptions. And using Teukai Jeev, although this would probably refer to using Teukai Jeev explicitly in the form of fire, but I think it also extends to other forms, is a total no-go. So the uh, as far as possible, Sadhu Bhagant should try their best to avoid Viradna of any Ekendra Jeev also, even in Apvadic situations, where it so happens they may take they may take the protection of the Apvads granted in the scriptures, but they should not be exploited or normalized in a way to do them on a regular basis.
oh,
Besides, so that is one aspect, but the second part is this medium itself is not the perfect medium. And this is one might think how hypocritical of him to say this while on a call right now, but the ideal medium is to go in person and learn from sadhuvagans, and even in absence of sadhuvagans and absence of shravaks, because uh, I mean, ultimately you're using a garbage medium um, for for this. So that's a secondary point. The first is with respect to sadhu bhagwans themselves using it.
yeah, okay, okay. Same goes for like recording, like Sadhu Bhagwan, like not giving permission, but someone else recording and posting it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so even if for sadhu bhagwans, firstly, if they were to not give permission and someone were to post a recording in this manner, it could for a one time you might think there's nothing problematic with this, but over time such a thing gets regularized. And secondly, when a person's watching such a video, and this is the case with most households that I see, I'm talking of my immediate circle of friends and family, you see so many of them sitting to have breakfast in the morning, and then they scroll through these channels or their YouTube channels on their TV, and they're just listening to these vyakhyans or these talks while they're eating breakfast or while they're lying down on their couch or whatsoever the case might be. So this is not at all possible. Uh, I mean, there is a very definite way uh, mentioned in the scriptures to even listen to the vyakhyans. One is supposed to sit in the yoga in the uh, Chaityavan Mudra while listening to Vyakhyans with folded hands on the ground. The Guru Bhagwan is supposed to sit at a higher platform. One is supposed to do Vandan to a Guru Bhagwan. When a person does Vandan to a Guru Bhagwan, the avagraha or the physical distance that should be maintained between the Guru Bhagwan and the listeners also mentioned. It should not be too close, it should not be too far. All of these things are impossible to execute in such a virtual setting.
Right, right.
So,
Thank you very
and
much.
there are several, I know there are several comments after I posted the picture that emerged on that post after I wrote the scriptural position in this record is, but uh, as of now, I don't see. I mean, it's never going to end this discussion. But yeah, I don't see sense in replying to a lot of the so let those be now.
Yeah, yeah, right, right, right. Thank you. One more question. Like we say, dharma is the inherent nature quality of anything, right? So we say the coolness is the inherent quality of water, right?
Yes, correct.
So, but like when water is like the temperature of water changes when it is in hot place or cool place. So like doesn't the like property of water depends on the where it is placed?
So that would even when water is exposed to a high or low temperature, the water becomes like that. But when you keep water as it is, other conditions being set aside, the property of the water is still supposed to be, cooling of sorts. Similarly, you're right in saying that wherever a particular thing is placed, it will change its apparent nature, which is why what we're aiming to do is, by way of practicing dharma, we are getting rid of all karma janit upadhi, be it good or bad, be it shubh or ashubh, and attain our actual state, which is free of any influence altogether. So once that connection is broken with mohonia karma and other karmas, there is no possible way that anything else will be able to influence us.
Okay. But Pashbhai, I'm quite confused. Like you say, we keep all the conditions as it is, but even then, like in the summers, we see the water like gets hot. It only cools when in the night or like when the temperature comes down.
Okay,
So
you ignore the example of water for want of specifications. Let's talk about fire, for instance.
okay.
I mean, I see why you would see a drop in, the temperature in water. Look at something like fire, be it summer or winter. Once you touch it, you're bound to get scalded.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like I just said example of water because it is like given as the most common
Yeah, it,
example.
it, is- it is a common example, and which is true because you're uh, uh, you're looking at water kept in a certain situation. But even then, water is always inherently, if you look at the nature of water, it's always going to be cooling. Just like now, you look at the example of jaggery. Jaggery is always something, according to Ayurveda, jaggery is something that causes cough. But if you mix that jaggery with dry ginger powder, it's going to become a medicine that cures you of cough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, please, Manoj bhai. So yes, you're right in saying that a guru can relieve a shishya from diksha due to the onset of certain ailments. There can be certain conditions or certain diseases by which a person might not be able to observe diksha at all. Uh, a distant relative of mine, I remember, this is about 40, 50 years ago. So Acharya Bhagwan Vijay Ramchandra Seshri Maharaja, he had 121 sadhuvans as his shishyas. My dad's uncle happened to be one of them, a distant relative. He met with an accident, and I don't know what part of his body was fractured, but it rendered him unable to practice any kriya or sadhurma at all. And seeing then that there was no alternative, his Guru Bhagwant, uh, you know, did the uthapna of his pravrajya, and he was sent back to the sansar. This can happen not only due to the onset of illness, it can be multiple reasons. The scriptures also abound with such examples at the times of Bhagwan himself.
Okay, thanks. I was just reading today something about Apta Mimamsa, so that's where I come
Right.
across.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
I believe we're done for the day then. Uh, Thank you, everyone. Pranam, and have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.